America, the land of opportunity, wrestles with a dark legacy. Racial tensions, particularly between Black and white Americans, cast a long shadow on its promise. This divide is not new. To understand this tension, we must delve into the heart of the matter, the historical and contemporary realities of race in America. We will examine the historical roots of racial tensions, from slavery to segregation and the civil rights movement. And we will listen to the lived experiences of African Americans, their pain, their resilience, and their hopes for a more just future. This is not just a story of Black and white. It's an American story. To comprehend the present, we must first understand the past. The history of Black and white Americans is inextricably intertwined, marked by centuries of oppression and resistance. Slavery, the original sin of the nation, left an indelible mark on the American psyche. Even after the abolition of slavery, Jim Crow laws enforced segregation and discrimination. The weight of history continues to bear down on us, shaping the racial landscape of America today. The story begins in the holds of slave ships, where millions of Africans were forcibly brought to America. Stripped of their humanity, their names, their families, they were treated as chattel, mere property to be bought and sold. This brutal system, lasting for centuries, laid the foundation for racial tensions that persist today. The legacy of slavery is not confined to history books. It reverberates through generations. The echoes of slavery are present in the systemic racism that continues to plague America. After the Civil War, the abolition of slavery brought hope for a more just society. However, this hope was quickly met with fierce resistance. The era of Jim Crow laws ushered in a new form of racial oppression segregation. The civil rights movement of the 1950s and 1960s challenged segregation head-on, with courageous activists risking their lives for equality. While the movement led to significant legal victories, it did not erase the deeply ingrained prejudices and discriminatory practices that permeated American society. The civil rights movement may have toppled legal segregation, but it did not extinguish the fires of racial injustice. The Black Power movement, born out of the frustrations of persistent inequality, demanded not just integration, but self-determination and pride in Black identity. The struggle for equal rights transformed into a fight for social and economic justice, addressing issues like police brutality, mass incarceration, and the enduring economic disparities between Black and white Americans. The echoes of the civil rights movement resonate in contemporary movements like Black Lives Matter, which shines a light on the persistent issue of police brutality and the devaluation of Black lives. These movements are a testament to the unfinished work of achieving racial justice in America. Systemic racism. It's not about individual prejudice, but about the very structures of society being designed to disadvantage Black Americans. These invisible walls stand tall, impacting every facet of life, from education and healthcare to housing and employment. Take housing, for example. Redlining, a discriminatory practice that denied mortgages to Black families in certain neighborhoods, may be outlawed, but its legacy endures. Despite anti-discrimination laws, Black Americans face higher unemployment rates and earn less than their white counterparts for the same work. And then there's the criminal justice system, a system that disproportionately targets and punishes Black Americans. Education, often hailed as the great equalizer, becomes another tool of systemic racism. Decades later, the scars of segregation are still visible in the stark disparities that plague the education system. Black students are more likely to attend underfunded schools, often located in segregated neighborhoods. The school-to-prison pipeline, a disturbing trend where Black students are disproportionately disciplined and funneled into the criminal justice system, further exacerbates the problem. This lack of access to quality education has a ripple effect, impacting future opportunities. The ideal of justice being blind to color rings hollow for many Black Americans. The criminal justice system, instead of being a shield that protects the innocent, often feels like a weapon wielded against them. Racial profiling, a practice where individuals are targeted based on their race rather than any evidence of wrongdoing, casts a long shadow over Black communities. Stop and frisk policies, though ruled unconstitutional in some cities, continue to disproportionately target Black and brown people, eroding trust in law enforcement and perpetuating fear. Studies show that they are more likely to be arrested, charged with more serious offenses, and receive longer sentences than white Americans for the same crimes. Mass incarceration has devastating consequences for individuals, families, and communities, perpetuating a cycle of poverty and disadvantage that spans generations. Systemic racism is not just about present-day discrimination, it's about the inheritance of disadvantage. Centuries of oppression have created a system where Black Americans start the race at a disadvantage, burdened by the legacy of slavery, segregation, and ongoing discrimination. The racial wealth gap, a stark testament to the enduring legacy of systemic racism, reveals the vast economic disparities between Black and white Americans. Generations of discriminatory policies, from redlining to predatory lending practices, have created a system where Black families struggle to build wealth, further widening the opportunity gap. The inheritance of disadvantage is a heavy burden to bear. Systemic racism paints the backdrop, but it's the everyday experiences, the subtle slights, the whispers of prejudice that truly illustrate the divide between Black and white America. These microaggressions, seemingly small acts of disrespect or dismissal, chip away at the soul, a constant reminder of one's place in a society that often feels hostile. Imagine being followed in a store, the suspicion in the eyes of the security guard a heavy weight on your shoulders, or being told you're articulate or well-spoken, backhanded compliments that imply surprise at your eloquence. These encounters, though seemingly insignificant to some, carry the weight of history, a reminder of the stereotypes and prejudices that persist. In Black families across America, there's a conversation that takes place, a solemn ritual passed down through generations. The talk isn't about the birds and the bees, it's about navigating a world where the color of your skin can be a matter of life and death. Parents, with heavy hearts, must explain to their children, often far too young, that the world may not see them the way they see them. They must teach them how to interact with law enforcement, how to avoid arousing suspicion, how to survive an encounter that could turn deadly in an instant. This talk, a sad indictment of American society, speaks volumes about the deep-seated fear and mistrust that many Black people carry. For many Black Americans, navigating predominantly white spaces, whether it's a classroom, a workplace, or a social gathering, can feel like walking a tightrope. There's a constant awareness of being different, of being watched, of being judged. The pressure to represent, to be the good Black person who defies stereotypes, can be immense. The lack of representation in positions of power, the absence of familiar faces in leadership roles, further reinforces this sense of otherness. This constant navigation of white spaces takes a toll, creating a sense of fatigue, of emotional labor that goes unseen and unacknowledged. Despite the weight of history, the sting of microaggressions, and the constant navigation of systemic barriers, Black Americans continue to dream, to hope, to strive for a better future. Resilience, born out of generations of struggle, runs deep in the soul of Black America. There's a deep-seated belief in the promise of America, in the ideals of equality and justice for all, even when the reality falls short. From the Civil Rights Movement to Black Lives Matter, Black Americans have consistently been at the forefront of the fight for social justice, not just for themselves, but for all marginalized communities. It's a dream deferred, but not denied, a hope that endures in the face of adversity. Media, the supposed mirror to society, often reflects a distorted image when it comes to race in America. Black Americans have long been subjected to misrepresentation, their stories told through a lens that reinforces stereotypes. These distorted images shape perceptions, fuel biases, and contribute to the racial divide. News media often falls prey to sensationalism, focusing on stories that portray Black communities through a lens of crime and poverty. The overrepresentation of Black suspects in crime reports reinforces implicit biases and fuels the perception of Black people as dangerous. This skewed representation ignores systemic factors like poverty and racial profiling. It paints an incomplete and often inaccurate picture of Black communities, fueling fear and prejudice. Fear. It's a powerful emotion, easily manipulated to divide and control. In America, fear has been used as a weapon for generations, fueling prejudice and maintaining racial hierarchy. The Southern strategy exploited racial anxieties, using coded language to stoke fears. This strategy used racial resentment to gain political power, deepening the racial divide. The media often perpetuates these fears. Overrepresentation of Black suspects in crime coverage reinforces the narrative of Black criminality. This weaponization of fear has real-world consequences. It creates a climate of suspicion and distrust, justifying prejudice and discrimination. Section 3. Reclaiming the narrative. In the face of misrepresentation and the weaponization of fear, Black Americans have fought tirelessly to reclaim their narrative, to tell their own stories, in their own voices, and to challenge the dominant narratives that have shaped perceptions for far too long. The Civil Rights Movement, fueled by the power of storytelling, used photography, film, and first-hand accounts to expose the brutal realities of segregation and racial violence to the world. These images, seared into the nation's conscience, helped to galvanize support for the movement and dismantle the legal framework of Jim Crow. Today, Black artists, writers, filmmakers, and musicians continue to challenge stereotypes, celebrate Black excellence, and shed light on the complexities of the Black experience. From the pages of literature to the silver screen, from the stage to the streets, they are reclaiming their narrative, one story at a time. The rise of social media has provided new platforms for amplifying Black voices, sharing experiences, and challenging dominant narratives. Hashtags like Black Lives Matter, Black Girl Magic, and Black Boy Joy have become rallying cries, fostering a sense of community, pride, and resilience. Section 4. The power of authentic representation. Authentic representation matters. Seeing oneself reflected in media, in positions of power, in the stories that shape our understanding of the world is crucial for fostering a sense of belonging, for challenging stereotypes, and for creating a more just and equitable society. When Black children see doctors, lawyers, teachers, and superheroes who look like them, it expands their horizons, their dreams, their belief in what's possible. It sends a powerful message that they too can achieve greatness, that their lives and their stories matter. Authentic representation goes beyond simply casting Black actors or telling stories about Black characters. It's about ensuring that Black voices are involved in the creative process, that their perspectives and experiences are valued and reflected in the final product. The fight for authentic representation is about more than just entertainment or media. It's about creating a world where Black people are seen, heard, and valued for their full humanity. It's about dismantling the systems of oppression that have for too long limited their opportunities and silenced their voices. Bridging the divide, a call to action. Understanding racial tension in America demands action. We must dismantle systems of oppression and confront uncomfortable truths, acknowledge systemic racism, and name the problem. Education is vital in this process. Teach an accurate history and equip future generations to challenge prejudice. Dismantle economic barriers and promote equitable access to resources. The promise of a shared future. The journey towards racial reconciliation in America is long but necessary. It requires justice, listening, and a shared belief in a better future. Imagine a nation where skin color doesn't determine opportunities. A society where diversity is celebrated and perspectives are valued. This is the promise of a shared future free from racism. A future where we learn from the past and work for justice. Reconciliation requires empathy, understanding, and challenging biases. It demands dismantling oppression and creating dialogue. Every American must participate. The task is daunting, but division is unacceptable. Let us choose hope, unity, and a shared future for all.